Hi everyone. I hope that we didn't get time from the lunch because performance issues, we have a lot to talk about performance issues, but I have for performance-wise, for your lunch, I have to shrink the talk to be in 15 minutes and lift 5 minutes for questions. If you have any questions, write it down and make it at the final so we can get the most of the session. Most of us, I think, how many of you is developing web applications? Interesting. Using front-end engineering paradigm like AngularJS as a front-end, using back-end, using web services, connections. Front-end engineering, how many front-end engineering here? Very, very interesting. I think this session will be, it's not for mobile apps only, it's for web development concepts. So whatever you think about the concepts, get the idea about performance optimizations, especially for mobile and handheld devices, okay, and at the same time for web applications. I'm going to start. This is my bio. My name is Mohamed Taman. I'm based in Egypt, live in Cairo. I'm working as an enterprise architect and software development manager in a company called eFinance. Egyptian based all of my applications, of our applications for the government. It's large scale applications serving at least 1 million customers. This is the minimum customers we are serving. In different areas, subsidy system, United Nations systems for refugees in Egypt, Syrian, Sudanian, African, whatever refugees kind of. Different projects, card-based projects, or for any governmental financial services, tax, custom, pension, whatever the government needs. I'm also Java champion. I love Java. I have a relationship with Java since 2011. Okay, working specifically with GCP closely for different GSI, Java EE, Java SE, Java ME. And I'm a GCP member, EGJUG lead, Egyptian Java User Group, won the Duke Choice Award for 2014 and 15, 2 years in a row, and winner of GCP participant in Adopt-a-JSR. This is my links, GitHub. This presentation is HTML5 presentation, so you will not find PDF or PowerPoint slides, so you can get it from my GitHub account, and you can wrap it as a Cordova application and put it in your mobile to try most of the code that I'm going to show you. If you are running the mobile, I should take a picture for you from this slide. Performance issues. Why I'm talking about this? Because I'm developing most of the application for customers and large scale customers. Okay, so you have to consider performance, especially when you're dealing with mobile device. Okay, because these devices has a very limited resources in terms of, if you consider the smart devices have greater CPU, have now capacity, larger capacity, memory size, but it's finally handheld device with limited battery resources, data consumptions on the client, which is costly for the client, a lot of different perspective. The memory itself, it's not, when it comes to the term of large space, it's like the hard disk, not the memory space. The memory space is very expensive in mobile devices, so you will not find large space. So if you have to consider this when designing. And point number 2, if you see something like this, and this line of code, what is the problem with this? Overhead in what? No, we're not talking about syntax. We are talking about, in performance-wise, you have list of items, and when you click on the item, specific item, for this kind of line, I'm getting item with ID 101 to be rendered in the next page. Okay. This is very slow. Why? Because you're targeting the server, requesting for the rendered data to be come back and put it on the DOM to be refreshed or to be generated on the client side. So you're requesting, most of us using this, like when you're using Java server faces or any frameworks, for example, most of the UI is generated on the server and sent it the whole package or all the DOM back to the client and rendered on the client. So you need to limit something like this. Or sometimes you are not going to do the first point, but some hijacks with jQuery are doing something like this. Okay, when I'm calling for product 101, and when the page or the data rendered comes, rendered and inserted into DOM. This is a very big problem because you're trying to get the data, all the data generated on the UI to render it again. So there is refresh mechanism again for the browser, which is overhead on the browser and the memory at the same time. The problem here could be solved by don't generate UI on the server side. As most of you is UI engineers or front-end engineering or whatever, you are a developer using front-end engineering, try to use applying generation of the DOM or the data on the client side. Don't wait for the data to be generated wholly, not the data, the UI generated on the server and get rendered this data on the client side. Just you have the DOM, okay? One of the most mechanism you can use single page architecture, okay? Single page architecture that we are going to use is very fast, cacheable, okay? And at the same time, you get all the UI at once on your application, okay? And you have all the pages, everything, but hidden. And you show just the div or the section rendering the page. So what do I have? You just wait for the data, not the UI. You're just getting the data from the server. And when the data comes, insert, remove, and manipulate the DOM on the client side. Don't request for the generation of components or UI from the server. All the UI, you have to tweak it on the client side. This is very fast and very performance beneficial because of the caching. This is the simple single page architecture. This is very beneficial in most of the web application and mobile hybrid solution use nowadays. jQuery mobile uses AngularJS with Bootstrap using this mechanism. It's one page divided to sections, which is divs or sections in HTML5. Each section considered as a page. So when you're requesting the UI for the first time, you have all the pages in one place, generated once, rendered once, and cached. And somehow by navigation and animation, you can get the transition from page to page. At this time, you're requesting to the server just for data. I'm getting product number 101 data, not UI. And you already have the UI. When you get the data, update the DOM. Okay? So don't generate your DOM on the server, on the client side. This is the first point. One of the biggest problem in mobile is data network access. Why? You are first thing, it's not powerful like something like my laptop is wired to cable to the internet. Sometimes you will be in a crowd in the city, so many people requesting signals, so that it's poor connection. And sometimes when I'm developing applications in poor villages in Egypt, there is no signal at all. So you have to think about caching. You have to think about how to make the data available while there is no network access, how to limit network access, because sometimes if you are data hungry application, you will consume all the bandwidth of your customer, which is harmful, and he will pay a lot of money for this application. This application is very bad in user experience, getting a lot of bandwidth taken, I'm not going to use it. Or sometimes with the bad connection, you are requesting data, waiting for a long time, and the UI is not generated. You have to consider this point. How? Something like this is very slow, just for requesting, okay, and waiting for data, then manipulating the UI. This is static data. This is some states. States never change it, right? It's never changed every day. Maybe it will be one added new town or whatever state, but think about when you design about which data we could cache. To get it locally, how we cache it, HTML5 provide for us a lot of stuff regarding this. To avoid network access as much as we can cache static data. We have local storage, we have databases, IndexedDB or SQL, WebSQL which WebSQL implementation is based on SQLite, which is RDBMS fully implementation. IndexedDB is key value based database if you have large application. In my application, I'm using WebSQL DB, which is fully RDBMS. Tables, foreign keys, primary triggers, whatever you want. Local storage for user preferences, for simple data you can use, it's key value based. So you can store your states, governors, any cacheable data you can use. So the retrieval from the client side is very fast. Instead of waiting for this cacheable data from the server, you have also file management. Think of the file as some sort of product information. You can use it for logging, whatever you want, but you have ability to cache your data on the client side. My application that we're working for Social Solidarity, Ministry of Social Solidarity, is fully offline, fully without any access to the data from the server. There is a question could be raised here. Okay, what about the combo boxes at the initialization? What about the data packages that you need? Okay, on the first login, I know that this customer related to this department, so I'm giving all the static data cached. So when the user login for the second time offline, all the data already cached, I can load it and populate all the combo boxes. So you can go to the poor people house, getting the survey, taking images, encrypted, saved it, everything you can do, finish your job. At the end of the day, go to your station, okay, which is department, which is have connection, and just send this application to the server. But you have the ability to work offline. This is case I have faced. So you have to figure out which design criteria you have to use. Design for performance. Also design is a very important aspect, and performance one of them. Another thing, something like this, when we talk about the line before that, I'm looking for feeds, for example. Okay, feeds is dynamic, so we can use some sort of dynamic caching, like what we do in back-end engineering. We're using JCache, we're using coherence for caching data. You can use custom adapters, and you have a lot of frameworks to do caching for dynamic data. Okay. Another thing, think about for example, your result set. I'm getting comments about movie. There is thousands of comments, for example. So why do I have to get all the thousands? I have to limit the results. I'm getting 5 by 5 comments. When you scroll down, for example, I get the next 5. Do you get the idea? Limit the result set height. At the same time, there is another point you have to consider, which is limit the width. What does it mean by the width? Mm-hmm. Yes, exactly. Don't think about, okay, this is my product, there is description, related other products, it has ID, name, whatever, the images. So what are you going to render? Just the name and the image. Request name and image only. So you're minimizing the columns, wasteless columns, useless columns. You are going to say to me, what about the future? I don't like to change my back-end calling and front-end to just showing description. No problem, it's a string. You can inject this new value inside JSON string, and you get it online without changing the API. When you design, think about performance and maintainability at the same time. So just limit the result height and width. This is points you can avoid network access. It's not avoiding network access, but avoiding in terms of bandwidth. And what if, and also at the same time, what if there is no network? this. What do you think about this? I'm requesting the product, and when the product's available, I'm going to display the product. What if the network is very poor? What are you going to experience in this? White page, waiting for data to be displayed. So the rule here, don't wait for the data to display your UI. Display your UI, then request data to update your DOM, not to create your DOM. Something like this. How? Sometimes when you render your UI, you are rendering the footer, headers, icons, everything, so the user get the experience of this is our application, and there's simple loader indicating that I'm requesting something from the server. Please wait, be patient. The network, I should give the user the feel that I'm working on something, not just white page. Then suddenly here is your product. You are very busy to wait for 1 second or 2 seconds waiting for data to render your UI. Okay? So don't wait for data to display UI. Never. Either it's web application or mobile application. When it comes to animations, most of us, or especially UI designers, like animation. You know, flipping, fade out, fade in. But you have to consider something. And powerful PCs like our laptops and desktops, it doesn't matter because the CPU is very powerful. There is no memory consumption. At the same time, there is no battery consumption. When the CPU is overheated, it takes a lot of power from the battery. So your battery will die soon. So what is the problem here? You have, and the processor is for processing data, not the UI. So you have another capable piece of hardware that you can use and improve your performance. What is it? GPU, which is hardware accelerated piece of hardware. How can I use this hardware? It's CSS3. It comes with a huge change in the design using transformations. Transformations, which get rendered, it's instructed to go to the GPU itself, not the CPU. So you left the CPU, yes, I am left it to work with operating system, getting the kernel requests, improving the memory, working with IOs. This is my task. Any gaming, huge rendering or game environment or UI environment, use transition of the CSS. Something like jQuery animate in the previous days using JavaScript to animate the page, which is very harmful, goes to the CPU direction. But if you would like to use the GPU, use CSS transitions. So something like this. This is concept of single page. Okay, we have different pages. Okay, we are just like the concept. This is the page number 1. This is the page number, for example, this is 2. This is 3. Whatever you want. This is kind of animation, okay, with single page. This is the concept. We can do it this way. This is very slow. This is works. You have the page, the position, left, center, right, and you apply the class, and the navigation will be happen. Very slow because it goes to the CPU and translated to be processed, and then the result come back and doing the processing. What if I need to make it fast? If you try this on your mobile device, you will experience how it's fast. Okay, this is more faster because all the transformations, not just translate 3D, goes instructed to go to the CPU to be GPU to be processed. So whenever you use animations, use transitions, or transformations instead of our old days static left and side and floating and whatever animation that you use. All the jQuery libraries nowadays is updated to transformations. It will be more faster than the old animation functions. Also, you try to use native scrolling. Don't develop your native, your custom scrolling. Using native scrolling, it uses the operating system scrolling, which is very, very improved than your custom scrolling. Okay, there is a lot of frameworks doing wrapping, to do scroll on the list or something like this. Try to use native scrolling by something like this. Just simple code. It will be translated to native scrolling. Another thing is when you experience is clicks. When you render this in your mobile or tablet, try to click this. If I click one of this, it will tell me that you need to run on test on touch device based. Just wrap it, deploy it on your mobile. It's Cordova based application, and try every single piece of this. When I click on this in the mobile, its normal behavior, it gives you 300 milliseconds. Then respond to your touch. What is this weird behavior? Why is mobile operating system doing this? Because it's waiting is to consider it's single tap or double tap. So it's giving you a time for 300 milliseconds. 300 milliseconds, sometimes when you click back, you will find it's not suddenly responsive. It's waiting for slow, minimum amount of time, then get back, go home, navigate to another page. Okay, you have to eliminate such. If your application have a lot of clicks or something like this, you have to eliminate something from this happen. You have to eliminate 300 milliseconds. How? There is a framework called Fast Click. It's implemented in this page. You can try it. You will find maximum 8 to 5 milliseconds. Because it has mechanism, it's inserted in the DOM and fire event, and once a touch end event happen, it get respond. If you have double tap, it's double touch, double ending, instead of waiting. And it's at the same time suppresses all the browser created events, suspend. This is the Fast Click. You can download it from here. It's so simple in implementation. You just load it and insert it in the DOM. That's it, and you'll experience all the clicks less than 300 milliseconds. What does this code doing? It's just simple list of images requesting sources. It's very slow. It's every time you're requesting the same images, you're getting the image, the whole image from the server. We're talking about optimizing your images. One of the biggest problem and data hungry issue is images in web and mobile. Instead of doing something like this, because this is static, all of my employees have their email, have SMS, my phone, map, contacts, whatever. It's static. It's icons, right? What can we do with icons? It's not dynamically generated or even product or whatever. It's static data. One of the issues to optimize images, use CSS spreadsheet. It's one single image. Define all your icons. This is one single image. Define the icons with specific positions, and the icon size is 14 by 14, for example, or whatever the width you need. Okay, and this is the whole images, and the space between each image and the image statically defined 5 pixels, so you can get the specific image. How we can use this? It's so simple in CSS. By this, first thing, you have a class called icon. Okay. And you specify the icon width, which is 14 by 14. Background image was the one image which is PNG that include all the images. Okay, how can I get every icon? It's so simple. If I need icon class, background positions from 0 to 0. From 0, 0, width and the height 14, 14. This is the image. Did you get the idea? That's it. Move 5 pixels, starting from this position, which is minus 24 and 0 because I'm still at the first row, then getting every single image to render. But finally, it's one image instead of multiple images. At the same time, for optimizing images, use the right image size. Most of UI designers maybe didn't consider this. Give you an image with larger scale, which is, for example, 900K or 1 meg sometimes. It's a picture, it's from the front of the page, and this will be an icon, this will be in product page, product type. Don't scale, don't scale. Don't consider that scaling images. So you scale, how you scale the image, it's 1,000 by 1,000, for example, pixel. Then you scale it down 300 by 300. It's very harmful. Why? Because the browser will request the image again. So you have additional 1 meg again. It's not cached because it's different place with new scale. It will get all the image, then scale it down. No, scale it down from your side. Provide 2 images. Even if you're reducing the size of the bandwidth by from 1 meg to another 1 meg. You have 2 meg of bytes to transfer from the RAN network. No, I have 1 meg. 1 meg and another one after scaling the image is 100K. You have reduced 900 kilobytes of or wasting your 900 kilobytes of bandwidth. This is one of the most important issues you have to consider, especially when you render a list of products. Don't use the same product you render for like Amazon. When you try to render the product to make it large, it's different from the product you see in the list. It's totally different. Okay, so they have multiple images for the same product because of the performance. And when you request your data, I will get your application. Not all the 100 product I'm going to show as a large. It's just one. Consider and calculate how much bandwidth you will save by doing this. Another thing, in larger projects, and like Amazon, for example, they host their images in scalable distributed systems because of the accessibility of the images. One of the bad things that images do when it's not requested, 404 and exclamation mark, which is give this image is not available, or you can't request the image. So you have to do this. For best availability, distribute your images on another server, okay, for cacheability also, purpose, and for availability. Another thing, avoid 404 for images by distributing your services, your images in continuous delivery systems like or distributed systems. So you avoid all the time the 404 for images. Rule number 4, limit shadows and gradients as much as possible because it's require a lot of calculations to render and add it to the item because it's additional tweaking to the UI. Tweaking to the UI that after rendering the DOM, okay, the browser tried to get these properties and inject it again to the component. If you are using a lot of shadows, I don't see here, I don't say here, don't use it, but use it wisely, okay, because it's requesting and something like, it's called page reflow, component reflow, and we will talk about this, okay? So try to minimize shadows and gradients. Most specific is box shadows, border radius, gradient, and text alignment dynamically. If you could do it statically from the first time and try to use it. I know that most of us would like to have these fancy features for UI, but you have to consider its UI against performance. Okay, based on your device, based on your customers. Minimize reflows. How many of you know what is reflow? What's reflow? You heard about it? Reflow means it's simple. Reflow means refreshing the page. If you study the DOM mechanism and the browser, how the browser rendered the DOM, okay, you will find if any single piece after rendering the DOM, this is the first refresh for the page. If you're injecting another UI, another refresh, because why? because the browser should validate all the hierarchy of the UI to see that the document is valid or not. So it's another refresh. If you even apply single CSS style, it will be refreshed. For two reasons, for validity, and the second reason for applying the tweak that you have applied to the component. We need to minimize this on the browser because refresh means a lot of the people will see the refreshment of the page because you just updating the component, all the page will be refreshed. It's bad experience, either on the web or either on the mobile. How to minimize this? Reduce the number of DOM elements. When most of the tools you generate UI with using a lot of elements, DOM elements, divs, spans, all of this is wasting because it's taking time to render your UI. Try to minimize. Use just the right component that you need instead of your DOM actually contain 1,000 components to render the complex shapes. Consider CSS with 100 component or 500 component. It will different. It will make a very big difference in rendering and the time of the rendering. Second thing, minimize access to the DOM. We have said this before the first time. Don't get the UI generated from the server and insert in the DOM. When you insert, it's refresh. So we are going to see how to reduce each point of this, how to solve each point of this. The second point, update element offline as much as possible. You can get reference for the component offline and update all the tweaking and customization and insert to the DOM. It will be one refresh instead of 5 or 6 refreshes. We will see how to solve this. Avoid tweaking layout using JavaScript, like animation. We have said before. This will incur in a lot of refreshes and the processor for rendering this. Batch your DOM element changes. If you have a lot of changes in one component, don't apply it one by one. Apply it as a batch. Okay? How we can do this? Let's see. This is very slow. Why? You're requesting the button, a.back button, from the header inside the DOM and providing some properties. Very slow because you're applying the properties one by one. This will incur in 4 refreshes for the page because you're accessing the DOM direct. Make it offline. So simple. Get the variables and apply the properties on that variable, and that's it. Because I don't need to update all the DOM. This is just this button. It will refresh 4 times but for the button, and 1 time for the DOM, instead of all the DOM 4 times. This is very slow. I'm requesting component from the DOM and applying even CSS dot. Each dot height with CSS. It's different method, which is apply properties of the component, okay, online, not offline. This is faster. Batch your properties once. So I'm getting the component. I'm telling the component, the DOM, I would like to apply all of this one time to my dialog. Even more better, use CSS classes. Instead of design issue, do you see in the previous code? What if you would like to apply this multiple times? You will write all this batch multiple times. Use CSS classes. You will benefit 2 things. Performance issue and maintainability and design issue. If you would like to provide another property, it will be in the class. It will be applied to all the components you're applying the class, instead of going to each component to add the new property. If I would like here to add, for example, background image. If I'm doing this, it will not hurt the performance. It's performance okay, great. But for maintainability, you are going to do what? You're going to go to each component, you're applying this and background image. If you are using CSS classes and applying just CSS classes, you are working with the class. Adding whatever property is, it will be applied to all the component. I like jQuery. I like AngularJS. I like most of the frameworks, the full stack frameworks. But what do you like really in this framework? Do you like just the UI? Yes, sometimes. Okay, why you consider all the framework, all the JavaScript files included, all the CSSs, or I don't need those, that's just UI. AngularJS templating improved, wow. I like templating, I like the way AngularJS model view controller. So when you consider the framework, you have to study the characteristics of the framework from memory perspective, benchmark it, and the size of the framework. Because the size is not the size of the file. Maybe the file will be 1K. But how many variables inside the JavaScript file will be loaded in the memory? And I'm not using this. When you grow, your application is growing and more business intensive, you will find you're adding a lot of libraries and your business will be grow. So you have to consider this. If you just like the UI, you can go to Tobacco, for example. It's just intended for UI, CSS, and something like this, and you can tweak it. Bootstrap, not the full stack. Do you get the idea? I like jQuery, but I'm using jQuery because it's include jQuery UI. Use jQuery library only to do your batching DOM and ease of access of the DOM, something like this. Some part of jQuery. So you have to consider and think about your framework, full stack framework. Unless you're using it and you are going to use all the features in the stack from the beginning. It's design perspective. So you have to consider this. And performance-wise, it's very important to consider every single piece will be loaded in the memory. This is the framework considerations that we have talked about. Final point, which is very important, is testing. I did my job, I created my application, it's look fancy, it's functional, but how it's going to respond on the device? We need to test this in terms of response time, data, function, UI. So we have some advices. We need to know the problem well. You can use Chrome DevTools to give you a lot of resources and information, and you can debug your application. Here, for example, you can see the timeline for loading and the response of each component and the loading of the DOM. So you can consider which component or which script, okay, take a long time to render your page or your application. At the same time, in the network you will find which application loading occur first, which piece of library blocking the others, so you can make asynchronous calls using require.js to load your libraries and resources dynamically, whatever you want. You can profile your application and check the memory of your application performance. At the same time, you can check the reflow of your application by showing the frames when applying DOM, when working with the elements. You can see the refreshment mechanism for frames, the frames per second for gaming applications. The reflow frames will be rendered, so you can see this is in real. Okay, this is why? Because of this, because you are finally developing web application, so you can test it on the browser instead of deploying it on the emulator or real device because it's not native. And another talk, which is top 10 key architecture points, I'm giving advices about how to architect your mobile application. One of them is how to make your application is browser runnable by abstraction, some sort of features in this. Also, there is a great benefit that you can debug your application from browser inside the mobile phone, on-site debugger, which is used by NetBeans, for example, when you are using it has a plugins in the browser. You can debug your application in the browser and see the profiling in the NetBeans console or in the mobile at the same time. It's a very great feature you can use. Okay, what is the difference between testing on simulator emulators and real device? This is very important, edges. I'm talking from my experience. Simulators are just that, simulators. Who know what is the difference between simulator and emulator? Okay, most of the Android development has its emulators. iOS, for example, has simulators. Why? What is the difference? Simulators simulate the software, operating system. Emulators try to mimic the hardware. Why Android using this? Because Android can run on macOS, Windows, Linux, Unix, whatever, because it's Java based, so it can run. I need emulator to get the same software like JVM do. You have different JVMs, but one source base code, which is Java. The same for emulators for Android. Emulators mimic the hardware and need to translate all this code to mimic the hardware it's running on. Because of this, emulator is very slower than simulator. Simulator trying to mimic the software. I'm providing shell for the operating system. Here's the iOS 5, iOS 8. But the hardware, I know that I'm engineering this piece of code for this hardware. So there's no application, there's no Mac OS application could be developed on Windows. So the same architecture of the hardware, it's for iOS, it's for Mac OS development, so there is no need to emulate the hardware because it's the same hardware. We need to just simulate this is operating system you are running your application on to see the features. But when you test your application emulator, simulator, you will test the functionality, not the UI. You'll never get the real interactivity of the touch. For many reasons, emulators are running on your laptop. I hope you can test the touch. It's a simple reason. Okay, at the same time, the performance, it's dependent on your specification of the hardware, the laptop, and the emulator running, the resources it takes. Don't feel that it's not responsive. When you run on the real device, you feel you test for performance and the UI responsive and touch events that you're using, not the emulators. Okay, emulator just, this is requesting data from the server, the data is get rendered. Okay, this is fine. Testing functionality. For functional testing, you can use emulator, simulator. For real device performance and UI testing, use the real devices. Test on many devices as you can and on different operating system, because different operating system, it's every operating system, even iOS 7 is different from 8, different from 9 in terms of the in the UI and rendering. Okay, it's clear till now? Any questions? I have a hidden point, which is very important. Consider this point as I'm talking about Java, PHP, C#, C++, JavaScript. Here, the circumstances we are talking about JavaScript optimization. I'm giving you 5 points you have to consider in mind when you're writing your code. Something like this is very slow. You have to limit your work inside any for loop or any loop. Try to move any functions overhead inside the loop. Okay? How we can improve this? Anything is constant, you have to remove it outside. Why are you doing this again and again inside the for loop? To solve this, it's very simple. You can create 2 variables and improve it will be evaluated once instead of 10 times calculations to get the same variable and count. Like this tester and value change. It's constant. Why I'm repeating the calculation of this every time inside the loop? So try to minimize working inside loops. Another point, minimize repeated expressions. Because you send this repeated expression again and again to the CPU. So why? If you have repeated expression, here we have repeated expressions, a lot of repeated expressions. We have to reduce it. Instead of calculating this repeated expression 5 times, you have calculating 2 times or 1 time. It will affect your performance. Performance means if you have reduced 1 millisecond, it will be good for your customer or your application. 1 millisecond here, 0.5 millisecond from here, and you will gain 1 second, 2 seconds, 1 minute performance reduction in different places. Don't consider this as 1 millisecond. No, it's a huge, it's big. With different piece of code you're optimizing, it will be 1 minute after that. You're reducing. This is very faster than the before. Did you get the difference? Okay, another one, if-else statement structure. Sometimes we have lengthy if-else. Okay, try to organize your comparison from most likely to least likely. If you have, for example, function that have if-else, 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 and you're most likely at the end, which is number 4, okay? And you call this in for loop, and you should go to this most likely comparison in for inside this for loop, which is loop for 100 times, for example. You will visit each branch, which is useless, to go to this condition, that you know that is most likely condition. So most likely condition, you know that the first amount should be compared, it will be this condition, okay? I put it at the first because this condition happens a lot. Prioritize your conditions. So you put your first condition that happens 5 times at the first, the second one happens all 3 times, second one till the end. So you avoid visiting branches, useless branches. Use indexing. Most of us using indexing, using hash table, hash map in Java, but in JavaScript. Instead of looping and getting the name of Mohammed, this column, okay, just traversing the properties, which is require a lot of time and the processing time to traverse each column properties, then get the value based on these properties, maybe additional properties you can do indexing by ID, by name, whatever the index you see. Here, for example, I have variable, it's called data indexing. The index here is the name, Mohammed or Dudu, for example. Then I have simple function, get from this index by username. I'm getting the full row. Instead of traversing each row, the name is Mohammed, okay, the name is whatever, it's okay. No, I don't have to traverse. I can get by the index. This is very powerful. You switch instead of lengthy if-else then as you can, because you're avoiding compared data. Comparing if-else require Boolean expression, so you have to compare something less than, bigger than, some equations. If you can translate it to switch a statement which is depend on the variable which is evaluated once, and based on the value go to this branch, it will be much better and faster for the compiler itself. This is my last point. Let's recap what we have said from the beginning. I think that you are lost. Are you lost? Okay. Don't generate the UI on the server. Try to generate every UI and update your DOM on the client side. Limit network access by caching. Dynamic static data. Limit the result heights and widths. Don't wait for the data to display UI, render UI always, then response with the data to update your UI, like AngularJS templating, what they do. Use hardware acceleration, transformation properties of CSS. Avoid clicking event using fast click. Optimize images, whatever it's possible. There is another point of optimization I can tell you about. limit shadows and gradients, consider the framework characteristic and which component you need when you develop, minimize the browser reflows, test, and the hidden feature is optimizing your code in JavaScript or whatever. The same ideas apply to another programming language. Thank you very much for your attendance, and this is my end of the session. If you have any questions, you are welcome. No questions means no question.
We're talking about optimization and showing code of an array with the names instead of indexes. We don't need to loop through. I'm not very familiar with how that is implemented in JavaScript, but I mean, the JavaScript engine has to look through your array, find it.
No, you have function. It's called get. We have written down. So it's finally an array. You get by the index. Like you make the index instead of 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. It's in JavaScript. This is valid. In Java, for example, the index always starts with 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 for the array. In JavaScript, you can remove this and you put your index. So you can get by index directly the name.
But you were talking about CPU, lowering the CPU usage by more effective source. This is the same amount of CPU usage defined in this index.
This is no, it's not traversing. It's you know that when you create JavaScript array, normally it will start. The index will start with 0. And so if I need any index at 13, for example, index 13 will give me the row directly without traversing. We have like override the index of the normal behavior by the names or by the IDs of the products. So when you tell the array that give me the product ID 101, it will get the row, not traversing. I'm not traversing here. I'm just returning this with index, which is the array username that I'm passing, which I'm getting the data by index directly without looping. There is no loop here. There's no null array.
In cache map.
Yes. Any question?
I think we would have to.
Because now.
I think we're over time, so you think we can have the questions here?
Yes, no problem.
Okay.
It's now the most people use a framework like Angular, and a lot of topics you have talked about today.